I found out some very interesting information. Did you know that right now, at this very moment that we're speaking, there are more than 40 conflicts taking place around the world? More than 40. And I found out that over history, at any point in time, there are about 30 or more conflicts happening all over the world. I'll tell you, that's kind of daunting. It's maybe sad in a sense. It's striking, but it's so true. And a lot we don't know about. Things that we do know about that are going on right now in the Middle East. You have the Saudi Arabia and the Yemen conflict. You also have the civil war in Syria going on. We've seen what's been happening over there, the gassing and the chemical weapons that have been used against their own citizens. You have tensions between Iran and, of course, the world with this nuclear deal that is on and off. In Africa, you've got Boko Haram ravaging all sorts of havoc in northeastern Nigeria. We've heard about over the years since 2014 the kidnapping of schoolgirls and schoolboys as well. You've got right now the fight for minerals in the Republic of the Congo. And that's been an ongoing conflict for some time. The countries surrounding them that are letting people go in. And of course, the Congo has been a place where millions of people have been killed, dating back to Belgium and King Leopold of Belgium. In Asia, you've got the coup in Myanmar right now. How is that being handled, especially by the United States, who we were the foundation and the bedrock for democracy? But a lot of countries are looking at what happened to us on January 6th and saying, well, look, how can you tell us what to do when even your own Congress, your House and your Senate can't come to any kind of agreement on what everybody else sees as an insurrection? A conflict there. There are all sorts of conflicts going around the world, but let us focus on the conflicts that are happening right here in the good old USA right now. Of course, we've got the situation here, a trial that's going to take place in Minneapolis. A police officer who put his knee on the neck of George Floyd. What has transpired as a result of that? And of course, the citizens in Minneapolis and indeed the world are looking to see what kind of justice might come out of that. And even in the fact right now, they're looking to see whether or not a third-degree charge will be added on. You have Republicans right now that are trying to change the election laws on early voting and same-day voting. And we know what that's about. It's about voter suppression. So we have those issues there. We have issues that are dealing with the violence against Asians, people of color. We also have issues now with immigrants. What are we going to do with all those immigrants that are coming in at our southern border? There are all sorts of conflicts that are going on here. You know, it was said some time ago, you could go up into space, in the International Space Station, and every now and then you could see these pockets of bright lights. Basically, they were explosions, obviously from conflicts, from bombshells and the like, in various parts of our world. This is the nature of conflict, and it's something that I've talked about with the human condition. Unfortunately, for those seeking to dominate, these things go hand in hand. So it's not unique to any country. It's not unique to any race. I guess the question is, what do we do about this? How do we deal with this? And, as a Christian, I often focus on things that took place in the Bible. And I want to focus on two portions of Scripture that kind of bring all of this home in terms of conflict and how people deal with it. I want to start off in the Old Testament, and it's the book of 2 Kings. It's chapter 7, and it starts off at verse 3. But I just want to set this up. The king of Aram, I should say, forgive me, was at war with Israel. But every time the king of Aram was trying to find out and do something with Israel, his plans were always thwarted. And why? Because Israel had this prophet named Elisha, and he would always get these dreams and visions on what the king of Aram was going to do prior to the point where the king of Aram was just he was just furious about this and wanted to know, how is Israel getting this information? Well, it was told to him that there was this prophet in one of the cities in Israel that was giving the Israelites and the king there the information. So he decided what he was going to do was surround the city that the prophet Elisha was in. So within a broader conflict, you have a singular conflict trying to snuff out that person that was providing information that thwarted all the kings of Aram's plans. So he gets a huge army and he surrounds the city. Now, throughout history, we have seen what happens when an army surrounds a city, and it cuts off their supplies, their food, their economy, and what people do to one another when they're faced with starvation. There were reports of cannibalism in this city where Elisha was, and the things that people were doing, unimaginable things, man's inhumanity to man. But what is done about this? How do people react? We've seen how they reacted. But what does God do? There were these 4 lepers who were on the outskirts of this city, and they were facing certain destruction too. And of course, they were outcasts by the Israelites. But I want to pick up what it says here in this chapter 7, verse 3. Now there were 4 men with leprosy, and at the entrance of the city gate, they said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say, 'We'll go into the city,' the famine is there, and we will surely die. And if we stay here on the outskirts by the gate, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Amorians and surrender. If they spare us, we will live. If they kill us, then we will die." So what did they do? They made a choice not to stay where they were, but they got up and they did something. And we can only surmise and imagine they perhaps did this by faith. When you are faced with a conflict, you do things by faith. In World War II, when there was a choice of not having the invasion of D-Day at Normandy on June 6th because of the foul weather, Eisenhower, who was the supreme Allied commander, had to make a choice. And he decided to go ahead, knowing that there could be thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed. But he just didn't stand there. He didn't do anything by faith. He went forward. Now, conflict is very interesting because even when you have people that are on your side, okay, there's still conflict there. For example, let's stay on World War II for a second. You had conflicts between the generals on the Allied forces. General Montgomery, a very brash, arrogant general, was in conflict with General Patton and, of course, General Eisenhower. Everybody wanted to take the credit. And so, therefore, there were conflicts. And these are conflicts with people who had the same goals. They had the same aspirations. It's to defeat the Nazis and the axis of evil. But they had to overcome those conflicts. And, of course, we know by overcoming those conflicts that we got the victory. There are also other conflicts. There are conflicts between people that you love and care for. I think we all know this. Yeah, I know this right now personally. I'm in conflict with somebody that I love very much. But because of my own arrogance and not seeing their point of view, and my wife had to point this out, I had to step back and I had to apologize. Well, this other person obviously is not happy and they are still upset with me. But, you know, I had to fall on the sword on my part and see where I was wrong. But there's also another side to this conflict, is that this person does not know and perhaps has not seen what I have been going through. And so you have two people that have come together for a really good cause, but we're at conflict now because of their issues and their concerns and the stresses and the things that they have to go through, my own concerns in life and the stresses that I'm going through, that you have this conflict. And I think neither one of us really saw what the other person, or really knows what the other person is fully going through. At least I can say that on my part. And these are people, two people, myself and this other person, that really care for each other, I believe, in a very profound way. So how do we deal with this? Do we remain at odds? Or do we decide to come together for the common good to continue what I believe that God has asked us to do, has commanded us to do? We'll see. Maybe something else will happen, but I do believe that even with conflict amongst the loved ones, there always is a resolve, especially with the spirit of forgiveness. So, conflict. It is part of the human condition. It is something that we all have been privy to at some part of our lives, and there are certain things that we have looked upon at from a distance, but they're there. Right now in this country, in this world, I should say again, there are 40 different conflicts or more going on around the world. Well, conflict also helps shape and mold character. I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, Martin Luther King said, man is never judged by how he reacts in times of peace, but how he reacts in terms of times of conflict and trial. So true. Everybody's good in peace for the most part. But when you're faced with something, it's like, one of my former pastors said, it's easy to pray for somebody else, but when it comes to your own issues, will God do it for me? Can I be obedient? Can I move from one condition to another by faith, not knowing what's going to happen? So let's go back to these four lepers. We get to a point in this chapter here where they come upon the camp of the Arameans, and they find the camp is totally deserted. They're gone. However this worked out, and we know that God was ahead of them, he moved them out of there. In fear, they figured that the Egyptians and other people were coming to the aid of the Israelites, so they left, they fled. So now they're faced with all this plunder, gold, all sorts of metals, food, clothing. And they started taking all this stuff up for themselves, wine. And they realized that they couldn't keep this all to themselves and would apparently also be punished by God if they didn't spread the wealth. So what did they do? They went back to the king of Israel and the city that was under siege and said, look, we have all this plunder. This is yours as well as ours. As a result of that, the people who had been under siege, who had been performing all sorts of atrocities against one another because of the human condition, because of conflict, they now had a way out. So here's the deal with this, because there's also a deeper meaning, especially for those of us who have to deal living in our own skin. And I'm talking about primarily people of color, but also a little bit wider than that. The lepers were on the outskirts of the city. They were not allowed in. We've seen this situation unfold time and time again in the Bible because they were looked upon as outcasts because of their skin. What happened to their skin? Well, so too we of blacks been ostracized because of our skin. Asians now facing violence against them are being ostracized because of their skin, something that they can't change. Women, okay, it's Women's History Month. It may not be their skin, but their gender. They have been ostracized. But those who are in a different skin color, who are a different gender, who have been ostracized, those who have moved forward and have moved forward for the benefit of their gender, of their race, of their culture, have been those people who have been willing to move forward, not look back, dealing with a conflict in a much different way. And because of that, because of their faith, because of their belief in the inmost parts and in the God that they serve, that they've been able to rise above the conflict and create a better good. Conflict, character. Conflict can be a positive thing, no matter how atrocious the tragedies may be and what you have to overcome. But it's how you deal with the conflict that will shape your character, how you grow, how you interact with other people, how you see life, and what peace it can give you and other people that are the benefactors of what you had to go through to overcome that conflict. And conflict is explained very well in the New Testament in the book of James. And it says this, I love this. The caption is trials and temptations. And this is the New International Version I'm reading from, as I did with the Old Testament in the Second Kings. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers." Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Now, who considers facing trials and temptations as joy? But it says this, "Because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." It must finish its work. But perseverance cannot finish its work, my friends, if you're standing in one place. Even those who pray have to do something. God commands it. We are living in a world now, as I said, where there are 40 or more conflicts going on. Well, the question is, what can you do? There's a lot you can do in your own small way to make change. Try to figure out with the gifts that you have, what you can do. If it's voter suppression, dealing with elections, if it's racial strife and intimidation, if it's dealing with the situation of immigration, if it's dealing with feeding the hungry, the poor, sticking up for those who don't have the same things that you have, dealing with conflict, and not just necessarily with yourself, but with others. Conflict, you see, is a good thing if you know how to deal with it. On Point, the show, we deal with conflict, primarily political for the most part, and primarily conflict that is inflicted upon African Americans. But this is for everybody. This is for people who are going through personal conflict with people that they don't like, but even with their loved ones. How do you deal with this? Who gets the glory in the end? And what betterment can become of the people who are involved in the conflict for themselves or for mankind? Conflict and the shaping of one's character as a result of conflict is the key. As we move forward here and talk about all sorts of issues on Point, I want you to think about conflict in your own lives, conflict in your community, conflict in our country, conflict in the world, and the ways you can become involved to help make a change. The one thing I will say in closing is, you can't stay where you are. You gotta move forward. I'll see you next week.